Welcome back to The Hard Truth with your host, Ozzie Knezovich. Folks, it's a sad day in the world right now. There's a lot of violence going on in Israel right now. And I and our guest, Mayor Nadine Woodward, both have very many friends in the Spokane area in the Jewish community. And we just want you to know that we stand with you. We stand in solidarity with you. You are in our prayers. Your families are in our prayers. And the nation of Israel is in our prayers. We need to stand against this type of sadistic barbarism. And I hope and pray we as a people across the world will learn that killing babies is never the answer. With us in studio, as I said, is Mayor Nadine Woodward. Mayor, if you want to reach out, feel free to our Jewish community, and then give us a little bit about you, how things are going, for those who may not know you very well, what you're about, and we'll get on with the interview.
Yes, thank you, Ozzie. I am very much in support of our Jewish community and the people of Israel as they undergo this terrible attack on their livelihoods, on their country, the atrocities committed by Hamas, as we've watched on the national news, is unacceptable. And Israel has always been a wonderful partner of the United States, one of the only democracies in the Middle East, and we need to do everything we can to support them in this extreme time of need. So yeah, I am running for re-election in the city of Spokane for my second term. We have term limits, so if I'm fortunate enough to get one more term, that's going to be it. My first term, certainly facing unprecedented challenges. The global health pandemic, which, you know, Ozzie, you as sheriff and I work very, very closely in the emergency command center for many, many months as we try to get our community, our county, our cities, the things that they needed as we were surviving the lockdown and all the other things that were going on during that pandemic. Also, the defund the police movement that happened that same first year in 2020. A summer of protests in our downtown. In the city of Spokane, our first riot. We kept our city from burning down. I was in the police command center for many, many weekends, making sure that our law enforcement, locally and regionally, that came to our help, had the tools that they needed in my direction of keeping our city safe. Also, a housing crisis, as we saw a migration of people move to Spokane from the west side of Washington and California during the pandemic, workforce shortages, inflation, and then, of course, Camp Hope, the largest encampment in the state of Washington on a one square city block of Spokane for 18 months. So it would really be nice to know what this job was like outside of all of those incredible historical challenges. I think we've done a very good job of leading our city through every single one of those, and addressing the police reform measures that were taken away, or took tools away from our officers in the 2021 legislature that my police chief, Chief Meidel, and I have advocated at the state legislature the last 2 years to try to get those tools back, because we've seen crime increase. I call it legislated lawlessness. What has happened in our state, certainly the decriminalization of drugs for 2 years because of the Blake decision. The state of Washington now leads the nation. We lead the nation in the increase of percentage of overdose deaths. We're number one. Yet, we're number 51 behind the District of Columbia when it comes to the staffing levels of our law enforcement in the state of Washington. And the city we need 90 to 100 more officers just to meet the national average for a city our size. So we have a lot of challenges still ahead, but we've been addressing them in my first term. I have the endorsement of law enforcement, and we have a lot of work to do in my second term.
I was reflecting about the 4 years that you set in your first term, and I believe I even mentioned it in one of our earlier episodes. Unprecedented is to be kind to those times. It was an amazing period of time, and a lot of people don't realize that that was the first riot to ever happen in Spokane. And they also don't maybe realize the work that we did both behind the scenes and out in the public, to one, try to prevent it. Two, once it happened, people may not realize that it started around 6 o'clock that evening, and by 2:30 we had our city back. And we had the fastest activation of the National Guard in the history of the state of Washington, and we had police officers from across Idaho and Washington come to our aid, and that was because of the leadership of you, the county, teamed up. There was none of this jurisdictional garbage, and we were able to get our city back, and we actually were able to prevent any further of those episodes from happening. So a lot of people forget the strength that you showed in that one, in the COVID situation, and I take my hat off to you, because that was not the funnest first term, and I can tell you it was not my funnest last term. So you mentioned public safety.
Because we're better when we work together, Ozzie. And as you mentioned, it was an incredible regional partnership collaboration that worked for the betterment of our county. We were the biggest county in the state of Washington to open our businesses back up because of our advocacy for a regional model to open up, not a statewide one size fits all. Our metrics on COVID weren't the same as the metrics on the west side. We convinced the governor to change up how he was going to open the state back up, and we got our businesses open before anybody else, the biggest county to do so. So it was because all of us working together, and I applaud your leadership. It was your role to call the National Guard when we had those protests and that riot that night, and we kept our city from burning down. So thank you.
Yeah. You mentioned public safety. 2020, defund the police. You still hear that ghost echo a little, especially, quite frankly, from your opponent's campaign. She's in favor of taking away qualified immunity from police officers, and I will tell you, the day that happens, you will lose half your officers in the state of Washington. It is that important, and quite frankly, folks, they couch that as, well, we have to be able to sue police officers. Well, guess what? You already have that ability. Trust me, I've seen it time and time again. So this is a false flag. Your opponent, quite frankly, is wrong on almost every single issue out there. But let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned 51st out of 50 states, and that 51st is because of the District of Columbia. People don't realize just how far down that puts the city of Spokane, the county of Spokane County, in law enforcement. It is frightening. I have friends across the nation that go, how do you do it? I mean, we're talking, we had at times 0.6 officers per thousand, when the national average is 2.5 to 2.7 for a county our size. And they just shake their heads. And I will tell you, it's because of the dedication of the men and women of our agencies and, the leadership. But your opponent opposes almost everything. What about Prop 1? Because that proposition is another thing that she opposes.
Yeah, and let me touch on something that you mentioned before, Ozzie, is the staffing levels. We to combat that, we have changed our staffing model so that we can have more coverage in neighborhoods, more patrols in neighborhoods. I've advocated for more funding that's a direct allocation to cities from the state and from the federal government. I serve on the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we've been advocating for all of those things, more officers for sure. Our officers last year averaged 100,000 calls last year. 100,000 calls, that's almost 300 a day. And because of our staffing levels, we have minimum mandatory staffing that requires at least 5 in each quad of the city on each shift. We've had to go from 4 shifts to 3 shifts. And it's difficult. We have overtime issues because of that. It's just almost mandatory overtime when you have staffing levels as low as we have them. And recruitment and retention, as you know, are the biggest obstacles or challenges of any department. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that's been good is that I am a law and order mayor that supports our police, so that's a recruiting tool, and we've leaned in on that. But having a soft on crime mayor, you're going to lose officers for sure. And this belief that taking away the protections of our officers by removing qualified immunity, that they could get sued just for doing their job and the city won't protect them or the county won't protect them. That's a no-starter for officers. Like you said, we will have a mass exodus out of our police department.
You will.
Mike Challenger also supports subpoena powers from giving the ombudsman subpoena power over our police chief and officers. And we have a very strong oversight system. The voters voted for it. They wanted it. We have an ombudsman. We have a civilian ombudsman commission that reviews complaints. And we average about 3 complaints a month, 7 times more commendations for our officers. But those complaints are investigated. And we've given more authority to our ombudsman in each labor contract that's negotiated. So it's pretty strong oversight right now. And I don't think we need to go any further with those 2 policy measures that we were just talking about.
You're absolutely right. And a lot of people have this opinion of, well, if the police were out there doing their jobs. Well, the problem is, your police are doing their jobs. Folks, the Spokane area police, both county and city, they do their jobs. We arrest people very, very quickly. We get them off the street very rapidly, but it's a system that is broken. And that system's broken because of policies and laws passed by Democrats and supported like people like your opponent. They supported all that negative, the legalization basically of drugs, because when the Supreme Court struck down the law, the legislature didn't really fix it. So your opponent is wrong on all that. And I wish I could have her sit down with a parent who lost their child to fentanyl. Just one time. Because I've done that multiple times. I've had them on my shows multiple times. And there's nothing like the pain that a parent feels. And, it's really inflicted by people like Lisa Brown and the Democrats who support this policy that is killing your city.
Well, one of the things that, even though I have a 5-2 supermajority on my city council, so even as a strong mayor, I can't veto, which really does make them a strong council. But one of the things that we did push for them to pass was a ordinance that banned open drug use in public spaces. And that took work. It also took engagement from the community, because initially the conversations around that ordinance were not positive in getting it passed. One of our council members, who was running for council president, said in an open meeting, well, these people don't have homes. Where are they going to do their drugs? Well, they can't do it on the street. They can't do it outside your business. They can't do it in our parks. They shouldn't be doing it near schools, daycares. I mean, where's the common sense anymore in any of this? It's gone.
Well, you mentioned schools, daycare. Not only are they against enforcing the law, but Lisa Brown's supporters, Ben Stuckert and Lisa Garcia, is they filed a lawsuit to prevent you from having Prop 1 on the ballot. basically trying to take the voice of the people of Spokane totally away. They do this in the courts all the time. They did it to us at Camp Hope. And the will of the people is being trounced by people, special interest groups that are spending thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to prevent, quite frankly, leaders like you from fixing the problems. What does it mean for our schools and our kids if Prop 1 isn't passed? And why is it Lisa doesn't support it?
Yeah, those are really good questions, Ozzie. Prop 1, for your listeners who don't know, is a voter initiative that will be on the November ballot, and it prevents camping 1,000 feet from schools, licensed daycares, and parks. Seems extremely reasonable. That's a part of our camping ordinance that we couldn't get passed locally by our city council. So some of our citizens decided, well, we're going to get the signatures that we need and we're going to get it on the ballot. And it was challenged, as you mentioned, by Lisa's allies, Ben Stucker, Julie Garcia. They tried to keep it off the ballot, and they lost that bid. And so my prediction is that it will pass overwhelmingly. My opponent, Lisa, has said, well, it's not an answer. Well, it's a tool that we can use to keep our community safe, because we have an addiction crisis in this country and certainly in the state of Washington. And what they want, and this is another reason why I have joined cities in the state of Washington and up and down the West Coast to petition the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn Martin v. Boise. Because Martin v. Boise basically says that you can't ban camping at all totally in your city unless you've got beds to direct people to. Well, we've increased our shelter beds. In my first term, I've increased beds, low barrier night-by-night emergency shelter beds, by almost 500. We opened up TRAC last year, the Trent Resource and Assistance Center, where on any given night there are 300 plus people who are getting a warm bed, 3 meals a day, and access to wraparound services at that site. We're even going to start a virtual court there, Ozzie, so that people with a criminal justice background can resolve some of those issues that are keeping them from accessing services and moving forward in their exit out of homelessness. But despite that, we're spending more money on those resources that are just the low barrier night by night. We should be spending our money on resources, transitional programs that actually are successful at moving people out. So we need to get rid of that Ninth Circuit Court ruling altogether, so we can do a better job, and that the cities can have control over how they address this issue. But yeah, so they didn't want the voters to be able to vote on Prop 1. Lisa says it's not a solution. I don't think so-called safe parking lots are a solution either, and that's part of her public safety plan. So now we can have parking lots throughout the city where people are living in their cars and RVs, and again, just like Camp Hope, victimizing neighborhoods, businesses, to the tune of millions of dollars, which we saw during Camp Hope for the 18 months they were there.
That's one of the most amazing things that I've seen Lisa get behind, is this whole parking lot issue, when she knows the damage that she, quite frankly, caused by sustaining Camp Hope with commerce money. And that happened. You and I attended multiple meetings over this issue. We attended those meetings at the Washington Trust Bank with a lot of the community leaders in the room. And Nadine, the one thing that struck me is the level of disrespect Lisa Brown showed you during those meetings. Quite frankly, the level of disrespect she showed anybody that spoke in a different terms than other than that camp has to stay. It was just chilling to watch. And, you know, we had multiple conversations and trying to get things resolved, but Lisa was always, well, that camp will be there at least until summer. And if you remember, she actually uttered the words, maybe until the January of 2024. And I was like, oh my goodness gracious, what did you just say? And, you know, for us to sit there and listen, and I take my hat off to you, because you're always that type of individual that tries to find a common ground with people. but there's no finding common ground with her, and there's no finding common ground with the council that you have had to deal with your entire term. You and I had a discussion once where I said, Mayor, I think they're going to stall you out for until about 18 months before your next election, and then they're going to try to paint you as a do-nothing mayor. The problem is you did everything, and they never brought a solution to the table. Not one time have they ever brought a solution to the table, and I watched it for 17 years that I was sheriff. So I take my hat off to your persistence in trying to build those coalitions, but folks, I'm telling you, they're not about working with people. And if they get this trifecta of Dylan, Betsy Wilkerson, and Lisa Brown, you're going to be Seattle overnight, because they will ram things down the citizens' throats for the next 4 years. Camp Hope, your perspectives.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said about those meetings that we had. The city had been in meetings for a year with the county, with, so of course, the city of Spokane, my administration, with this WashDOT, with Commerce, sometimes the AG's office, and finding some type of resolution, a timeline of when we can get the encampment closed. Even while that row money, the right-of-way initiative money that the state provided, Spokane County got almost $25 million. Very, very, very few people have been permanently housed, maybe a handful. Most of them are at TRAC, by the way, the Trent Resource and Assistance Center that I opened a year ago.
And Mayor, real quickly,
yeah.
Lisa Brown has been talking negative about TRAC in most of her tweets, and it amazed me because her friends back in April of 22 were in line to possibly run the place. But she takes shots at TRAC continually, but she never gave anybody credit for the fact that within 2 months of you having to change contractors, you had that place up and running and doing well. And it was a community-wide effort, the county and the city joining together one more time, but you led that effort. And I can't understand how Lisa can talk out of both sides of her face, though she often does, and criticize TRAC when it's exactly what they talk about.
Well, and she criticizes because it's expensive. It is very expensive. Low barrier housing, 300 plus people every single night, with wraparound service is very, very expensive. But again, this Ninth Circuit Court ruling, Martin v. Boise, is requiring us to do that, and so has the city council with the ordinances they pass have required us to have beds to even be able to enforce sit and lie and illegal camping. So it's the only answer and tool that we have right now to keep our city safe. And we do have those people who are being safe every single night, because let's face it, many of our homeless people are victimized on the street as well. The vulnerable homeless are victimized, and the victims of crime. But the thing that gets me about Lisa's criticism of TRAC, she will say, oh, well, there's only portable restrooms, portable showers, no running water. Well, they didn't have any of that at Camp Hope. But and they were sleeping in 6 inches of snow and sometimes in the middle of a muddy field, but that was okay. Yeah. So now we've moved them indoors. We wanted to put infrastructure into that facility, but council is not supportive of that right now. But I think the most ironic thing about the criticisms regarding TRAC and coming from, again, Lisa's allies, Ben Stuckert and Julie Garcia, is that they refuse to encourage people to go to TRAC. Yet, now that Camp Hope is closed, and we put an RFP out for a new operator for TRAC for 2024, who do you think wants to operate it? Ben Stuckert and Julie Garcia. You cannot make this hypocrisy up.
No, you can't. And quite frankly, they have started a homeless industrial complex because they're getting a lot of money to run these type of camps and organizations. But the people just don't seem to understand how much money was wasted by Lisa Brown and her compadres because they refused to allow us to get, and we could have closed Camp Hope before January. It could have been done, but they refused. And Lisa made it very clear. Well, that camp will stand until at least this summer. Mayor, you and I both know the reason that is her friends had contracts that lasted until this summer. She lined their pockets, and she made sure that they got rich while the people in that camp suffered, while the neighborhood around that camp, the elementary school around that camp, and the businesses around that camp suffered. And I hope that the people of Spokane don't reward her for doing that to you, the people of Spokane. But real quick, because we're bumping on our times, Lisa wants to dismantle the criminal justice system because she claims that there's systemic racism within the criminal justice system. Mayor, I can't think of any policy, any law at any level of government that allows systemic racism. Matter of fact, in my profession, if we did that, we'd go to prison. Mm-hmm. That's what the law says. So at that point, you're left with, well, then it must be the people in the system that are the racist. And my question back to them has always been, which one of your judges are racist then? Because most of the judges are Democrat leaning. Which one's racist? And again, they don't give a solution. How are you going to deal with that type of criticism? Because I know the heart of you. I know the heart of the people that work under you. I know the heart of the police officers under your command. They're not racist.
No, and they're doing, we as a police department really are a model for the reform measures that we've implemented in the last 10 to 12 years. Recommended from the Use of Force Commission, a Citizen Use of Force Commission, from the Department of Justice. We have implemented dozens and dozens of reform measures. Our officers go through at least 40 hours of implicit bias, of a de-escalation, of alternate resolution, conflict resolution, all those things. And some of them get 80 hours of training a year. And they're out just enforcing the law. It doesn't matter the color of the skin. They are out enforcing the law. They signed up to make their community safer, and that's what they do out on the streets every day. Now, there are a couple bad apples. Now, I know you've had them in the sheriff's department, and you address that. You address that quickly, and we have an oversight commission that addresses that as well. But when it comes to this belief that officers are targeting certain demographics, it is against the law, and it can't. We don't allow it to happen, and the laws don't allow it to happen. Measure 1 is dearly needed in our community. Our jail is poorly designed. It's outdated. We at the city, we have a municipal court. We cannot detain any of our misdemeanants because there is no room in the jail. Only the felons are being held, and only on certain circumstances will they release somebody so somebody else can have a cell. And we need to look at a different kind of jail. I'm all for rehabilitative jails that give people mental health, detox, drug treatment, that gives them a job skill so that when they're released they don't go back to a life of crime. We have to have a holistic jail, and I am all for that. But we have to have a space for people who we want to face the consequence of their actions out on the street, victimizing people, threatening people's lives. We have to be able to have a safe community, and incarceration has got to be an option. To think that nobody should be in jail is wrong way of thinking.
And that is the way
out on the streets.
That is the way Lisa Brown thinks, and her cohort, and all that system you described. That there is a plan for that. It sits on a shelf collecting dust right now. That type of jail was designed and ready to build in 2010. But Brian Beggs, the council that you had to fight with for 4 years, stalled it out. Amber Waldrop stalled it out. Lisa Brown was never supportive, and they never come with a solution. It's always a problem, no solution, or your solution doesn't work, but you're not going to give me any alternatives. So we developed that gel to answer each and every one of their criticisms, and they still wouldn't support it. Again, Mayor, you've done an amazing job trying to navigate and trying to build those coalitions. I'll never forget in one of those meetings at Washington State or Washington Trust Bank, and I looked at the director for Empire Health and asked him a simple question. Isn't it true that Lisa Brown is preventing you from working with us to resolve Camp Hope? And his answer was yes. You were there. Yep. We were all there, and we just kind of looked around the table and went, okay, well, how do we move forward? Mayor, last 2 minutes, yours. Go for it.
Well, I just want to bring up one other example of, you talk about disrespect in those meetings that we had at Washington Trust Bank. That was the stakeholders of the businesses downtown, all the departments involved with working on Camp Hope, and we had the Hello for Good nonprofit that kind of facilitated those meetings so that we could get to a timeline and an end to Camp Hope. And Lisa was in that meeting, and you were called to be there because they wanted to hear law enforcement perspective. And she didn't like what you were saying. So no. the party of tolerance and in participation and all of that, she looked at the facilitator and said, do we have to listen to him? And he said, yes, we do. I invited him here because we want the law enforcement perspective. Now, to me, that was probably one of the most unprofessional, disrespectful things I have ever heard a former elected and a cabinet member of this governor ever say in a meeting and in front of a conference table of people. But I'll just want to say it was a pleasure to work with you in my first term. Ozzie, I just want to thank you for the service that you gave to our county. And I hope that and especially after listening to this, so thank you for the opportunity to talk about the challenges of my first term. I really believe that, I come from a place, I'm not a career politician. I'm not looking for my next appointment or my next job. I did this because I love my city. I came from a place of being a broadcast journalist for 35 years, 28 in Spokane. People trusted me to deliver the news to the point when I retired, threw my hat in the ring for mayor. Nobody knew if I was Republican or a Democrat because they didn't know my bias on the air. I did my job the way I was supposed to. I am serving the people. I believe that government is supposed to govern for the people, not over the people. And I think that's what Lisa's going to do. She's going to turn Spokane into Seattle. And we need to keep Spokane. We need to keep our own identity and find our own solutions to the challenges that we're facing. And we need to keep moving forward. So I hope that the great people of the city of Spokane will see that in me and reelect me for my last and second term.
I do too, Mayor, because I don't want to see what would happen to the community that we both love very much. Even though I'm no longer in the area, Spokane will always have that special place in my heart for them. And you've done a good job as mayor. I hope the citizens give you that one more term to get some of the things that you want to get resolved. But I can tell you that with Lisa Brown, it won't happen. And once again, Lisa, you have an opportunity to come on the show just like the mayor does. I hope you'll take me up on that. And Mayor, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you.
Stand strong. And folks, this is Hard Truth with Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Have a great day.